ESPN app. Welcome back. The Knicks suffered a 21-point loss to the Cavs at home last night. Afterward, Knicks GM Scott Perry and President Steve Mills held a press conference, which, guys, that is very unusual. We're going to play that, followed by Coach Fizz talking at practice today.
Obviously, Scott and I are not happy with where we are right now. We think the team's not performing to the level that we anticipated or we expected it to perform at, and it's something that we think we collectively have to do a better job of delivering the product on the floor that we said we would do at the start of this season. We still believe in our coaching staff. We believe in the plan that Scott and I put together and the players that we've assembled, but we also have to acknowledge that we haven't played at the level we expected to play at. We haven't played we've seen glimpses of how we can play as a team when everything comes together.
I got a 2.5-year contract. That's my insurance. You know, that's our business. The insurance is about that I have a contract.
Fizz there, in part reacting to a story from our Adrian Wojnarowski and Malika Andrews saying that Steve Mills, quote, has started to lay the internal groundwork for Coach Fizdale's eventual dismissal, which is very big. Welcome to the Jump, Woj. And I want to give everyone a heads up. Woj also very hard-working, the Gordon Hayward story. So if you see him tweet in real time here, that's probably what that is, and that's lucky too. Woj, tell us a little bit, though, about this Knicks story. How does that jibe sort of with what you've been told that Fizz is out there this morning saying he has assurances, he's got a contract, he's had Perry supportive behind him?
Well, David Fizdale is going to be a company guy. He learned that in Miami. You back management regardless of what might have happened the previous night in a news conference. But there's no question. You remember, Steve Mills has survived several coaching hirings and dismissals in New York. His overall record is well under 500, 150 games plus, I believe. And so he is consistently got the ear of owner Jim Dolan, and what he said publicly is very consistent with what he's saying privately, which is they have put together a good team for David Fizdale. This team should be winning. Now, that is counter to, I think, a lot of the conventional wisdom around the NBA. Other executives, coaches in the league were stunned by that news conference, the timing of it, the tone of it. While your coach is in the locker room talking to the team to march in and do that. It was unusual.
Yeah, I mean, that was, to me, one of the also really super interesting parts of this piece you wrote, because you had that line saying, Mills is selling James Dolan on a roster constructed to be highly competitive in the East. And then you had other reporting in the story there saying rival executives and scouts see the roster as unbalanced and, quote, slow of foot. So how does that all jibe together, especially with Mills telling Dolan, hey, this should be a competitive team in the Eastern Conference?
Well, in the end, this is a coach who has 2.5 years left on his contract. And this is what happens when the team is not playing well. You're not going to see Steve Mills here really take much responsibility for the fact that this is, that they've had Mitchell Robinson out, that Frank Ntilikina has trouble keeping, the speed of opponents is tough. You saw it last night with Sexton and Garland. And right now, especially with Kristaps Porzingis coming back Thursday, you know what the Garden could look like, sound like. He comes back, plays well. And that trade that is on Mills and Scott Perry's resume last season and how far it is clear to set them back, you saw this was a precursor last night to getting out in front of it and putting it on the coach. That's where the Knicks are right now, Rach.
Well, is there any sense of how quickly the Knicks would intend to move in this situation?
Well, at 2-8, this is a team that, especially at home, they've gotten blown out twice now at home, Sacramento, Cleveland, and I think the home blowouts, certainly, put some gravity on this. They did just win at Dallas. They played well at Boston, who's been the elite in the East, but those bad home losses certainly have played a factor in the optics of this 2-8 start. And, for David Fizdale to make it beyond this week, he probably needs to not have more of those But there's no question he is very much on the clock with management, and they are putting this squarely on him. They made that clear last night.
Yeah, I mean, it is hard to really express to people who don't do this day to day just how rare a press conference like that was last night from that organization that's been sort of secretive and kept management out of the public eye to do it this early in the season. I think this is absolutely fascinating. And of course, the Knicks beat the Mavericks when they played in Dallas. But as you mentioned, when Kristaps Porzingis comes to town, it's going to be an entirely different story. Woj, I know you're working like 4 other stories right now. So if you get breaking news later, we will be checking back with those reports as well. We really appreciate you taking time out to do this today now.
Thanks, Rach.
All right, talk to you soon. So, Chiney, what was your reaction seeing what happened last night at the Garden and then seeing Fizz come out this morning and be like, oh, I'm going to be okay?
Yeah.
Nothing to see here?
If I'm a player in that locker room, I have a lot of questions just because you don't want that type of transitional energy going around your team, especially when you're fighting for wins. And I think Woj's point was right, spot on the money. Like, if you think about playing on the road, there are no expectations there, really. You're going to go out there and play hard. And it's not been a question of whether the Knicks are playing hard, because I think a lot of guys are. Marcus Morris is leading the team in scoring. Julius Randle is doing what he is doing. I know he had 20 points per game last year, but this year he's 15 or so. Kevin Knox, double figures, and RJ Barrett is doing his best to try to bring life to this franchise. It's not necessarily about playing hard, it's about playing well. And I think balance is the issue, but you can't point to the roster and say this is all Coach Fizdale's fault, because he's only been there 2 years. This is something that you, in the city of New York, you can point to across the city and say, all right, they've been building something and there's fruition from what they're building. I don't think it's all on the coach, it's decision making. Again, everyone's going to have the eyes on the Garden when Kristaps comes back, and I think that's the issue here. They're trying to get ahead of a situation instead of stay behind it, and it's unfair to the players.
Yeah, the weird thing here, there's a lot of weird things, right? Start with 10 games in, you feel the need to have any sort of State of the Union address about your team, regardless whether they're 0-10, 10-0, to do that. Then you're doing it after the game. Typically a time where tempers are flared or whatever. If you were going to do that, wouldn't you wait till the next day to make some sort of statement like that? 3, you're doing it while the coach is still in the locker room talking to the team. So obviously you haven't consulted with him about expectations or anything like that. And so when I see Steve Mills, who's been in the NBA forever, and I see Scott Perry, who's been in the NBA forever, do something that is so out of the ordinary, the only thing that I can do connecting the dots is say they were compelled to do so.
So I asked our producers to put this together today. This is everyone's tenure with the Knicks, right? Obviously, Fizz, the most recent, just got there compared to the other 2. Steve Mills was during the Phil Jackson era, right? When we talk about, it's different since Phil Jackson came, it's different with Scott Perry. Since Phil Jackson left, it's different with Scott Perry, not different with Steve Mills. And the team, you can think about what the team's record has been over that time. You see the percentages there.
Right. So,
it's hard for me to say this is David Fizdale's
fault.
But the point being, even if it was Fizz's fault, that's not how you handle it. And these are not 2 neophytes. They're not guys who came from Wall Street and we're trying our hand at this NBA thing. These are NBA guys. So to see those guys do that, I feel like that comes when you are under pressure from someone else, someone who controls your destiny. I'm not naming names. I'm just saying that's not the way that you behave. Now, you talk about the roster. Unbalanced, not only in terms of position, but also a lot of players with similar talent level. So it's very hard to create clear defined roles. Shanae, if you walked in the locker room and you say, I'm the best player here, but then there are 7 other guys who think the same thing and can legitimately do so because the talent level is all the same, it makes it harder to kind of put together some structure. And then finally, I can't leave Fizz off the hook as well because he's kind of done things with the lineups. Some of it is injury-driven, but some of it seems like there's not a lot of consistency.
And it affects players' confidence.
Right. From day to day where I don't know where I stand in the coach's eyes. All of this is to say it's a bad situation. I don't think there's any one person to blame other than...
I'm
not going to name names, but just keep going upstairs.
You're talking about ownership there.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Okay. Now, it's interesting. You guys saw Woj during our talk with him that he was in the middle of checking a bunch of things. I mentioned at the top he was working on the Gordon Hayward news. And sure enough, he's got Gordon Hayward news. So let's take a look at that. Boston Gordon's Hayward will undergo surgery on his fractured left hand today. His agent, Mark Bartelstein, tells ESPN. I think we've got Woj back to talk to us about this. Oh, we're going to come back on camera here.
Rachel, yeah,
Up here we go. Go ahead, Woj. What you got?
Hey, Rach, now you know why. Well, I just spoke with Mark Bartelstein, Gordon Hayward's agent. He is going to undergo surgery on that left hand today in New York. He'll go under in the next couple of hours, and then they'll know better a timeline on Hayward's return to the Celtics. But he was in New York, met with a specialist. They went through and decided that surgery would be the way to go. And we'll know more, perhaps as soon as this evening, about when the Celtics could expect Hayward back in their lineup. Do you have even a rough time frame? Are we talking a month, several months? Do we know how much of the season he might end up missing? I don't, Rachel, and I think they're going to be clear on that once the procedure is done. They accomplish what they hope they do, but they've been cautious on putting any timeline on it until that procedure is complete. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. It's just hard, I think, for Celtics fans who have finally been like, okay, this is the guy we got. This is the all-star we got. And Gordon played so well in Utah, has had so much trouble since being back in Boston. And to know that he might miss a big chunk of the season is certainly a blow for him personally and for Celtics fans. Thank you for reporting all this news live on the air. We appreciate it. If anything else breaks in the next 20 minutes, we'll see you back again. We know where to find you. Thank you. All right. I'll be here. All right. So, Chiney, what do you feel that is going to impact the Celtics now that we know it's not a couple weeks? It is least, when you have surgery, you're out for what? At least 6 weeks, maybe 2 months, maybe 3 months. At least 6 weeks. Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. No, I think that this is a tough loss just for, Gordon Hayward personally coming back from an injury. And then right when you get your momentum, it's sort of, but I think that's why we saw surgery happen so quickly. Because, when I had my second injury, I was like, let me have it as soon as possible so that I can get back to being the person I was. But I do think they could absorb this loss largely because Kemba, that's what he did in Charlotte. And then Jason Tatum, Jason Tatum's trying to take the next step, and not just be the guy that people say is good, but he's going to be great. And then obviously Jaylen Brown, he's capable as well. So. Janae, I laughed because this injury happened and I said to myself, you said Kemba's used to this. I'm like, this is still the best team he's ever played on. Exactly. Even with the injury, he's still the best team he ever played on. Coming up, we will talk more about Nikola Jokic. He sunk a pair of game winners this weekend. Two game winners. Has he officially taken the mantle as the league's best center? He did get that spot in the All-NBA, but there's been controversy. We'll see. We'll talk when we get back.